Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Controversy, and conversely, you also just don't get any sales, which is the problem here. But I do think that that's probably what led to the fact that this was not more controversial as it was coming out. So the thing about Tom King deciding to talk about race, what's been really interesting about this era of his work is I think this is his weakest era, because you have the early stuff. You've got Vision and Sheriff of Babylon, and the Omega Men, which are all just incredible works of fiction. Then you've got like that crescendo where he goes upwards, and you've got Batman and Mr. Miracle and Heroes in Crisis, and to a certain extent you can start roping in the stuff that came after with Strange Adventures and Rorschach and stuff. All of that is this dude on like an upward climb. And then you've got this era where I don't think he's doing his best stuff. I like Human Target. I don't love Human Target. I like Gotham City Year One a lot. I like you, I would not put it on his top echelon. I'm really liking Danger Street, but I'm also sort of seeing the things about it that just don't click with me too. But the thing about this particular era that's so good and so interesting is this guy just decided, I'm at the top of my career. Let me just do a bunch of stuff I'm not good at and figure out where we can grow with that. So like you've got a book like Danger Street that's got like fucking 20 characters, and he's balancing this entire story based on a play, juggling all of these characters with one artist the entire time, weaving in and out of all of these different narratives, creating this framing device with Dr. Fate's helmet. Like that book is masterful in Tom King trying to write something that he's never done before. And then you go to Human Target, and it's similar. And Human Target is like, how much control can a writer physically give up and let nothing but the artist be the storyteller? And how can you facilitate the art with the least possible words? And then you've got Gotham City Year One, and I think you've got a similar thing here where it's, let's do a non-Batman Batman book. And all three of these are things where he's really trying to branch out and really trying to do new and unique and interesting stuff. And these three books, you really can't just throw into the camp of sad superhero stares out window 12-issue miniseries, you know? Like he has very aggressively been memed for being that guy. And for the last few years has very aggressively kind of not been that guy, which I really appreciate. So the idea that he decides to do a Batman story where the origin of Gotham is founded in racial politics is a thing where, like, you say that to a person and you say, that is not something I'm comfortable with, so let's do it anyway to see how far I can get with it. You really got to admire that. Like, I think that's really, really cool. The mystery itself is really interesting, and there are elements of this where, like, it kind of fits back into his comfort zone. Like the way this book opens of a woman comes to Slam Bradley's office, enticing him into a mystery. He gets his partner.
Steve, you cut out there. I don't know if you can hear me.
Target that's just dead on arrival. Or Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is just True Grit. Like the first from an old movie, which is fun. And then going forward from that is where all the unique stuff starts spinning out. And I know there's some mild concern. The only news this book really got is the idea that is Bruce actually a ends, because that's kind of left with a question mark.
Steve, you're kind of cutting in and out a little bit.
But aside from that, I think everything in between
Okay.
is really dense and really interesting. And,
Steve.
yes,
Can you hear us?
I can hear you now.
Okay, we keep telling you keep cutting in and out really bad.
Hear you
And
now.
it's just like, no, I'm gonna fucking roll. I'm gonna keep going.
Okay, you were.
Uh-oh. We're having okay, you wanna know something funny on top of the technical difficulties we're dealing with right now?
What's up?
I realized I wasn't recording your guys' audio for like the first 15 minutes.
Oh my god.
So this episode's kinda cursed, and I'm sorry.
This is the downfall of Geeky Gentleman Year 1.
Damn.
My bad. We'll just upload the episode just kinda in meter res, and I'll just put it on screen that it's like, this is a fucked up episode. Enjoy.
This is the black label of Geeky Gentleman. That's where we got.
The black label.
We all just started. We went wild at those first 15 minutes. If you want to hear us, subscribe to our Patreon.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'll summarize the first 15 minutes. Alfie and Steve really like the book. I'm a little more sitting on the fence, but I do enjoy it. And I said that this book could have used more instances of the N-word. So there we go.
That is exactly what happened. Yes.
Outside of, go ahead, unless you got something to say, Steve.
Oh no, sorry. I was gonna try and gear us to talking about Phil Hester, unless you got something first about Tom King, since we talked about him for like 20 minutes.
I wasn't going to talk about Tom King specifically. I was just going to talk about the larger story of the book. But I think.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Talk about just let's get that eye stuff with Phil Hester's work out the way first, so that we can just jump into that, because I imagine that's where we're going to be spending most of our time. I really like Phil Hester's work here. Again, I don't think he's as impressive to me as his contemporaries with this kind of style. I forget her name. It's Alisa, like the Shandifer, like the person who draws Love Everlasting.
Eliza Chartier? Elsa
Yes,
Chartier?
I
Elsa
was
Chartier, that's it.
Completely off. Eliza Chartier, thank you very much. I'm subscribed to her YouTube channel as well, so I feel bad for not being able to say that name properly. She does a similar kind of work with King, and I don't want to just put artists against each other, but I think King does gravitate to, like, Lee Weeks also has this kind of style. I think aesthetically King really likes and plays with it. I think Phil Hester might be one of the weaker collaborations he's had artistically, but that's really hard to say because he's worked with so many fantastic people. So I think this book looks really good. I love a lot of the paneling choices with this. There's an argument between Slam Bradley and Batman's grandfather, where that way you see like the figure of anger in the panel kind of looming over the rest of the conversation, and like it's not like a panel break, it's just like a separate figure. Stuff like that I find really, really compelling. I think that's really interestingly from like a panel layout way. It makes it very easy to read, and the readability of this book being a mystery story with lots of dialogue and lots of different characters to keep track of, I think is a skill a lot of artists don't get credit for, be able to show that cinematically, panel by panel, and even differently cinematically, because you're going to be able to pause on pages and look at details to try and figure things out for yourself. And I went back through some of the art here, and there are like clues like left in just the background stuff, like in all these kind of things. So I think artwork's very, very impressive for me, but not something where I think it carried the book. I just think it served the story really well, and I think I liked it a lot. But it's not blowing me away in comparison to some of like the other like this isn't a Human Target situation where it's the Smallwood book, because I don't think this is the Hester book.
That's interesting, because I do think it is kind of because I really like Phil Hester. Phil Hester is really famous for doing Green Arrow for like 40 issues in the early 2000s, and like he was part of the relaunch with Kevin Smith, and then went into the what's his name, Brad Meltzer run, and then the Judd Winnick run. And he was the guy that was there all the way through bringing Ollie back from the dead, up through him marrying Black Canary, and like the birth of the Green Arrow family and all of that stuff. So I've always really liked Phil Hester from just reading that. And those early days had more of that sort of manga influence style. The big thing to note about this book is in the early days, Phil Hester used to be inked by Andy Parks. And that guy went on to do a lot of his own graphic novels and co-create stuff with Phil Hester, and he's still working, but he hasn't inked Hester in a while. So for like the last like 5 or 10 years or so, he's been inked by the person who's on this book, whose name is Eric Galsupt, something like that. But those two have had a really consistent relationship, but it's taken them a long time to kind of find their with each other, I would say. And this is the book where I think you can finally see like, oh, these two are as good together as Hester and Parks ever were. And there's a lot of things about how Hester's style, a guy who uses traditional pen and paper and decides to sketch everything out and has an inker and a colorist and has everything spaced out again, that's kind of fallen out of fashion because so many artists now are either hybrid artists or fully digital artists. You don't get a lot of books anymore that have inkers, really, unless it's an old artist coming back for a guest issue. You like very rarely have inkers, and a lot of that is just because since so many people are digital, it's a pretty easy way to market yourself to be like, yeah, I don't need a colorist, I don't need an inker, I'll just take care of everything. And you advertise by saving the company money, essentially, by not having to farm out someone else to ink you. But Hester's never really gone for that. He's inked himself in places, but in general, he's talked about how his style is too kind of abstract and playful for a big two superhero book. So like, someone's asked if he'd ever like ink himself on a mainstream DC or a Marvel title, and he talks about how like Marvel would never let him ink Man if he was drawing Iron Man. Like, it just would not happen. And so having someone else that is a little bit more smooth and traditional helps him. But this book is anything but that. This is a book where Hester's characters, who are kind of ugly, like intentionally ugly, really get to shine. And they do so much together, playing with just the blacks and whites, where there were silhouetted figures in this book all throughout, but the silhouettes are all white, and the blacks are kind of just reserved for clothes or things in the present. So like every time we flash back, the flashbacks are all done almost entirely on like these big whites, which is really, really cool. So much of noir is playing with shadows on people's faces, and this book certainly has a lot of shadows. But the interesting thing about it isn't so much the blacks in this, where the inking is. The interesting thing about this is that Hester spent so much time detailing out people's faces to the point where he actually had like a running chart of how injured Slam Bradley's face gets throughout the series because he gets punched so many times that there is like this insane consistency all the way from his nose getting broken early on to what he looks like at the end. And like, that's really interesting to look at. And I feel like he's really playing a lot with negative space and really testing the limits of his relationship with his inker, where I think this book is I think in a very different way, this book is as visually interesting and engaging as Human Target ever was. In a different direction, obviously. But I think what Greg Smallwood is for multimedia digital art, Phil Hester is for traditional art book. And I love that they came out side by side.
I like the color usage. I like a lot of the silhouette stuff in here. The fact that Slam Bradley just gets his shit absolutely kicked in constantly is so good. Like, I love that in detective stories. You know, you got that in like Chinatown where fucking Jack Nicholson gets fucked up and has like that thing on his nose.
Yeah, for like half the fucking movie, he's just got a band-aid on his nose.
And then, like, that's in, like, Lucky Number 11, too, where he's got, like, his fingers are all bandaged up for a good chunk of that movie, and he's got, like, bruises on his face because he keeps getting the shit rocked out of him. And I like that. That's always, like, a good trope that's fun. So I did get a kick out of all of that stuff happening. And I did notice that in the art, that, like, Slam Bradley not only gets fucked up, but gets, like, fucked up in this book. It's like to the degree that it's just a trope, but at the same time it's like, nah, but they really do fuck his ass.
He sees it coming. Half the time he's just like, yeah, and then I got my moving on. Issue 2
I like-
opens with like one of the best close-ups of his like bruised up, cut up, swollen lipped face, and it's fantastic.
I think my favorite was the. Normally they just give you a beat cop, maybe a detective if you committed a murder. Having the commissioner come down and do it himself, it was such an honor.
So good.
Yeah, that one got me pretty good. I was like, okay, this is funny. It's like it's a good level of balance in the humor and the like bleakness of it. You know, it's a good touch. But yeah, I really did enjoy a lot of the depictions in the art here. One thing that I was I don't know how I feel about it, where you get the reveal, issue 3 or 4, that Slam's mother is black, but that he presents as white, and so that has made life easier for him in some ways. And he's taken advantage of that in his life. And I thought that was interesting, but I don't know if it was just me or if it was just the choice of the artist. Because the way that they portray it, or the way that the script dictates it, is, and I think Slam even says this himself at a certain point, was he could pass for either. If you looked at him right. Like, in the right conditions, he could pass for either. And it's like, at first, the one lady, when he's doing some of his lead chasing, pegs him as a white man, but then she starts talking to him, spends a little bit of time with him, and then she's like, oh, now I see it, now I get it. You are at least half black. And that was interesting because I don't think any of the images of Slam do seem to present him as black. He is always drawn and colored very much presenting as white. I don't really ever see any of the ambiguity that the script seems to mention. And I thought that was kind of an interesting incongruity between the art and the script, or possibly just a deliberate choice by the artist.
Well, and the example you bring up about like how he's talking to that one person, and like over the course of the conversation, that he could kind of go either. I think that was more sort of the point, because I mean, I understand what this is trying to go for with that whole, if you are mixed at any degree, there are certain contexts where if you don't look at, in a certain context, no one would think to look deeper at you, versus in other contexts where nothing has physically changed about you, but the way you're speaking, or the people you're around, or your ability to kind of navigate that other space allows people to see like, oh, actually, maybe there is something more going on there. A lot of that ended up with like word choice or how you associate with people. Like, I mean, I think there is a certain level of like, if your body language or your words shift in one way or the other, it doesn't matter what skin color it shows, you can tell this person is something more than that. And I think that's more of what it was going for. And I mean, I've got that because I'm an Indian person. Both of my parents are Indian, but I just look like a white guy. So like if I'm just walking around, I look completely white. If I'm walking in a sea of other Indian people, I look like a white guy. But like you get me talking in that context for more than a second and you're like, oh, I see it now suddenly. Suddenly it's like my face is a completely different, even though it's not. Because the context has shifted sufficiently to where that idea presents itself in your head, and you start to see me based on that. I think that stuff actually is really interesting and really nuanced, because having that be sort of the linchpin in the history, that the idea that Slam Bradley was the very right and very wrong person for this job, precisely because he could kind of walk between both worlds, and no one kind of takes that possibility seriously, is really, really interesting.
No, I think so. Again, it was one of those things where I'm like, is it just me that I'm not seeing it, or is it the intentional choice of the art direction? It was just an interesting little thing that I picked up on in the art. I like the use of the like solid color background silhouette kind of things. You know, it's that Ian, you sick fuck, but honestly, it's my favorite scene in the book was the lie detecting bullets. It's just one of those things where I'm like, Tom King worked in the CIA and shit, and you always wonder, like, okay, is this just the sick fuck writer has this idea, or is this like actually based on some real shit? Because it just felt so like totally genuine as like a fucked up thing to do in an interrogation. Of now, if you lie to me, the gun will fire. Oh, I'm gonna pull the trigger either way, and if you lie to me, the bullet's gonna fire. But if you're not lying, it'll know and it'll stay. I'm like, oh my god, that is so fucked up. Like it's just so fucking terrible, but like such a great scene. Just one of those like magical writing moments that just works so well, you know.
Yeah, no, I really, really dig that. The level of like casual brutality in this book is just off the charts.
Mm-hmm.
Alfie, do you have thoughts?
Any more thoughts on the art?
No, I think I basically covered everything. And I think I'm the least qualified person here to talk about the race thing of his appearance and stuff. So I'll let you take care of that as the whitest man alive. I have no.
What you're saying? The colonizer doesn't have idea. The colonized? Okay.
I think again, someone else can speak on it, but like I think maybe my only critique would be the colorist could have put him down a shade compared to everyone else at least. Like that's not a hard thing to do, but I understand as well, like Sam Bradley historically always looks like that, and I don't know if this is something King invented for the backstory, if this is his just regular thing already.
I would be very surprised if this existed prior to this book.
I don't think it does. Slam Bradley has not shown up a ton over the course of DC's history. He's in the first issue of Detective Comics, like that's his debut appearance. But even in that book, he gets replaced pretty quickly. Not even by Batman, but like by another bullshit detective character. And then in post Batman DC, he's shown up in things here and there. Like Ed Brubaker had like a very brief appearance with him when he was writing Catwoman. And then there's like stuff vaguely here and there, like he shows up in Heart of Hush and stuff, but like there's nowhere near enough material for you of him where you could like conceive of a backstory in any more depth than what you get here. I know there are some like Slam Bradley side characters that are not in this book, but I think at this point the idea was just we need to do a history of Gotham, so let's get Slam Bradley, who is technically older than Batman. But the thought process did not go any deeper than that. It's kind of like the Strange Adventures thing of like, let's get Adam Strange, but let's not give a shit about Adam Strange's lore. Because who the fuck cares?
Well, it is an interesting side note, because I think that is kind of like King's biggest downfall as far as, like, if you're looking for a reason that people don't like King's books, I think that's what it basically all boils down to, is King as a writer is not shy about using the characters to tell the story he wants to tell, even if that kind of breaks their pre-established lore, character, background, whatever. And I mean, this is something that I've been on multiple sides of with King, because, like, yeah, I kind of love it when he does it with characters I don't give a shit about. But then, like, he does it to Kyle Rayner. I'm like, but no, that's my baby. And that's kind of the problem that fine line he walks is, I'm a Kyle Rayner fan, but I can, like, separate myself and go, okay, but this is still a really great story, and there's a lot of really interesting things being done with Omega Men. I don't imagine anyone really gives a shit about Slam Bradley.
Right.
I'm sure, like, once Twitter finds this book, it's all over. King has truly canceled himself. But until that day.
Yeah, it's one of those really interesting things where, like, I understand why you'd have the mentality of, like, in principle, a writer should be able to do anything they want to any character because the characters are a vehicle for the story, not the other way around. Also, don't do it to my favorite character because that's my character. So, like, it's really hard to like, turn that mentality off. And that's why I'm kind of bummed that he's not allowed to do more of these like more obscure character miniseries because they don't sell. Because I think the idea that he just kept sticking to characters no one gave a shit about created a little bit of insulation. It didn't really, because people still got pissed for no good reason. Like Guy Gardner has not done jack shit in like 5 years, but people were still mad about him showing up in Human Target. Human Target fans do not exist until someone announces that Tom King is writing Human Target. Same with Slam Bradley. Same with fucking Adam Strange. There are no Adam Strange fans. If you say you're an Adam Strange fan, you're a dirty fucking liar. Who the fuck reads Adam Strange? The people who write Adam Strange don't read Adam Strange. So
you know what you should do, Steve? You should commission some art of like a basically like a DC original character, and just like commission art of them in like different styles throughout like, you know, the entire publishing history of DC. It cannot be a character that actually exists. It has to be fully original, right? And you just like, here's him in the 50s, here's him in the 70s. And here's what you do. You just publish an article that's like, Tom King to do new 6-issue series about this character, and you just like complete bullshit. Like you got an interview with him about it, and you just have him start saying the most like controversial things ever, and then you just post it out there for Twitter to see, and they'll be like, I can't believe Tom King's gonna ruin this beloved character.
yeah, no, that would be my shit. But yeah, no, I totally get that. But I feel like to a certain degree, you do kind of have to step outside that and wonder, like in the grand scheme of things, like you might like this character, but how much of an impact are they actually making to the point where it warrants that level of outrage? You know, so like if you Adam Strange is your favorite character because you are boring and you have no taste, then totally fine. All right, I understand you being upset about Adam Strange being a war criminal. But also, when is the last time Adam Strange has ever had a book? And if the answer is in 20 fucking years ago, then maybe, just maybe, the idea that he is getting any publicity is better than the fact that he is non-existent in your universe. You know, just a little bit.
He showed up in the issue of Bendis Superman run where he's like, he shows up back to Earth after Earth disappeared in the Phantom Zone. He's like, it's not funny.
And there's the infamous panel, which I love sharing every time, though, where Superman's like, you know, Adam's a real good. I wish I knew him more. I feel like we'd be really good friends. Bendis knew what he was doing. He knew something. That's just a really funny in-joke that only became funny like 5 years later. Like King must have told him like what was happening with that, because it's really funny.
Lo and behold, one day we'll get an interview and Tom King's like, the secret origin of Adam Strange is, I read this one Bendis comic, and I thought, what if I just wrecked the shit?
It's so funny. I love
it. Back to this though. Yeah. I mean, art, character, all that stuff aside, the story in general is really, really interesting. I mentioned earlier that it is basically like the first issue is just like the first 10 minutes of the Maltese Falcon. But from there, it takes a lot of its own interesting twists and turns, and it plays with a lot of noir tropes like femme fatales and such, but it never sort of feels like it's coasting on your expected twists with those kinds of devices. It is very much kind of doing its own thing. And it's pretty fucking dark. Like, it's one of those books that's sort of deceptive in how bleak of a worldview it ultimately presents by the end. I mean, like by the end of issue 2 or 3, you've got a dead baby, you know, like very quickly you've gone from child kidnapping mystery to conspiracy to murder a child. And like it gets pretty hefty very.
I thought it was interesting because like the second it was, oh, the baby's been stolen, I'm like, oh shit, is this gonna be some Lindbergh shit? And sure enough,
yeah,
it definitely very much took notes from real life, and that was heavy. And again, that was something I mentioned earlier, before the competent Ian decided to check the recording. Thank you, competent Ian. Of I don't particularly care for stories, by and large, where the Wayne family has, like, these dark, awful things that happen to them, and, like, their entire lineage is just tragedy after tragedy. I just always feel that makes it, like, a little kooky, a little, like, well, then why the fuck did Thomas Wayne go down that goddamn alley? You know, you kind of need Thomas Wayne to be like, nah, nothing bad ever happens to the Waynes. This is Gotham. You know, you need that, like, stupid level of confidence. So, for this to do, oh yes, Bruce Wayne's, what would it be? I guess it would be his aunt, yeah? Bruce Wayne's aunt was kidnapped and murdered as a baby. And so, you know, it kind of led to the destruction of the soul of Gotham. Would, on paper, not be something I'd care for very much, but just as presented, King, as a competent storyteller, does a really, really good job of making it compelling, making it interesting, saying something beyond just, isn't this cool and edgy with it. So I did end up quite enjoying the direction the story took, even though I don't particularly care for the take. Or the general notion.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Ian on that one, where I do like the Waynes themselves kind of remaining untouched throughout it all, and I think you could have done this story with, say, the Cobblepots or something, and not having to include the Waynes so much. But I do think you'd lose like that. The reason you use the Waynes is because they're Batman's family, right? And that's the biggest one you can do. So if you're going to do a story like this, you just want to go for the biggest swing, right? Like, it's the one thing you can do that's, like, the most impactful thing, and it's the thing that has, like, the most intrigue in the narrative because it's directly related to our main guy. That's why, like, every time we go to Krypton, it's always the Owls, or Jor-El specifically. It's just because, well, if we're there, we want to have some grounding that can recontextualize, like, why we have,
like,
so
maybe if we make a show about Krypton,
yeah, right,
and feature Superman's grandpa.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what this fucking spin-off's gonna become next. It's just called Gotham 2, because we already made Gotham 1, but this time it's even earlier. I was saying, the having Batman himself, like, show up in this, and we even have Batman, like, as a presence, and I'm just gonna take this and read. King really liked the Batman, because it's, like,
I don't know
the
if he's
same.
actually seen it.
He has to. There's no way. It's
there have
so
been
close to it.
There were so many interviews where after the movie came out, someone asked if he's seen it, and he says he hasn't seen it because he's been busy. And I've never once heard him confirm anywhere that he has actually seen it.
He must be lying.
He also writes all of his scripts like a year ahead of time. So, like, this book came out in October, but it was probably done the October before that.
That is a crazy coincidence, then. If it's not. Phil has to.
What? Someone wrote a dark Batman story? What?
No, I'm talking the fucking notes to the Batman. It's got the hyphen. It's got the same fucking symbol and shit.
With the little messed up Riddler messages.
It's the same sim as the logo from the movie. Like, and that's a unique logo. Like, it's not like an average Batman logo. No, that's what it looks like. So, that was just funny to me. I was just like, someone's lying. Someone at DC maybe come to change it to tie in with that or something. But, like, anyone involved in this, it says no one had seen that movie, and when you're working at DC Comics, you're making a Batman book, it's fucking right. Like, there's no way. But that aside, I think all of that, like, again, adds to it feeling mythological. I like the little fucked up, like, what Batman's grandfather's, like, what his version of the Batcave was. I think that's a really fucked up idea.
Yeah.
that Batman lives in his grandfather's spank cave. That's really funny. And I want someone to bring that up. Like, because I'm like, that's the thing that everyone talks about, right? It's like, oh, why is this giant cave under here? What was anyone doing with it? Did no one know? And,
Sex dungeon.
Nolan movies go with like the Underground Railroad and stuff like that. But like the idea that one of them just used it as his little creepy hideaway, I'm like, that is kind of what Bruce uses it for. So like, one of the Robins is jacked off in the Batcave. You know they have. So like, it's getting used for its intended purpose. Like,
Okay, hold on, pause. One of the Robins has jacked up in the Batcave. On 3, say who it was. 1, 2, 3.
Dick.
Jason Todd. Who? It was Damien? You're saying Damien?
Damien's never touched himself in his life.
No, I said it was.
Well, who'd you say? I'm not hearing yours, Alfie.
I said Jason.
Okay, so we're in agreement. It's Jason Todd. Okay, good.
Speaking to the thing about Gotham's origins, I'm with you guys too. Like going back and touching the Wayne history really. That's part of the Morrison run too, where I kind of tune out the most of like, I don't really need to read Return of Bruce Wayne. I don't need to see him go through all of time and destine himself to just have a tragic life. Like a lot of the history of Gotham stuff that's invented in those books, I just don't care about. And so the in my mind, the Wayne's entire character is they exist to be shot in the face. And the moment you do anything more than shoot them in the face, you've already done too much. And so going back and doing anything with them, it kind of bores me just inherently. But the idea of going back and doing something here where you talk about the history of the city and what exactly led to its decay the way we see it is really interesting on its face. And you can't do that without talking about the Waynes at least a little bit because they are so foundational for the city from their beginning. The thing I found really interesting about this is it's not really the history of how did Gotham become a bad city. It's the history of when did Gotham stop pretending it was better than it was, really. Because in the first issue, you've got this really interesting page that stays with you where Slam Bradley is driving through the street and you see like all these kids playing ball in the street and they're waving at him, and at the bottom panel they're back. And the page is your antithesis to Gotham. It's the exact opposite of Gordon's speech in Year One, where he's like, this is a place where people come to raise a family and buy homes, and it's the all-American city, and it's all of that. But that same issue, the last page is the exact same, where they mirror it, and he's driving through, except now he's on the other side of it. And it's a bunch of black kids playing football, and they're waving at him. And this time, instead of him smiling back at them, everything's in darkness, and his eyes are covered. And he's talking about how it's not so much that Gotham prospers, it's that some of Gotham prospers at the expense of other parts of Gotham. And as the story goes on, you very quickly realize that the idea isn't so much that like Gotham was ever a good place. It was, you have corrupt police who brutalize people to get convictions. They manufacture numbers. They create a system where the good part of town stays segregated from the bad part of town. And it creates the illusion that Gotham is better than it is. And it parallels that duality that you're seeing later, where in modern Batman comics, the idea is the corruption starts from on top and then trickles down. Where in this the idea is it's not even so much that the corruption trickles down; it's that it's there on every level. And so we get that that moment in issue 4 where the commissioner who beat the crap out of Slam Bradley, Slam talks about how like if you want to rate the commissioner on his job of keeping the city safe, then you cannot say he's corrupt, because that's exactly what he does. But he is not a good person. And by beating the shit out of him on the street for what he did to Slam, he's opening the floodgates to say this city is changing now. Because now you can't even pretend like there's a distinction between doing the right thing, the wrong thing for the right reasons. Now it's all just the wrong. But he doesn't care, because unlike Batman, he's not a good person. And so he's letting that floodgate open. But none of this is new. None of this is revolutionary. This is always here. This is literally just peeling the Band-Aid off. And that's a pretty... I feel like that's almost darker than what you get in older comics like Dark Knight, Dark City, right? Like Gotham's not built on an ancient Indian burial ground or some bullshit. It's not like there's an ancient bat god demon that has destined it for badness all along. You know, it's none of that. It's just this place is full of bad people, and sometimes the bad people do good things, but at the end of the day, the bad people are still bad people, and you just have to face that. Like, that's a lot darker than fucking bat god baby sacrifice.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I don't know. It's an interesting read, and I personally, I like History of Gotham stuff quite a bit. Like I said, when I heard Year One, I was like, fuck, Jonah Hex, Amadeus Arkham, Jonah Hex, Amadeus Arkham. Give that team up back. It was the best thing ever. Especially when Tallulah Black showed up and just fucked the bromance. It was so good. But, you know, I generally like that stuff, and I do like the idea that Gotham City was, like, cursed. I think that's interesting. But I also think that this is more realistic. This is more fascinating. And I kind of like I don't know, I like the idea that that you don't have to choose, that it's comics, so both of these things can coexist, and it's just a matter of interpretation, because I love the notion that Gotham is built with Gothic structures and in a, you know, labyrinth sense, because the architect went crazy and was trying to trap a bat god and never let him out of the city. You know, that's just good shit, man.
Or like Batman Gothic by Morrison, where it's like it's got all of these Gothic, because a cathedral is an architectural structure where all of the pressure to keep the building up points upward. And so Gotham City is hell. So all the churches point their pressure upward towards heaven, so that maybe one day all the demons can be expelled. Like, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I like the idea that's like, okay, is there an actual bat god, or was the city planner just crazy? And it's like, it's Gotham. You don't know. It literally could be either. Like, you could have it be this... these two things are not mutually exclusive. The existence of city corruption and, you know, crooked politicians and racist police forces is not mutually exclusive to the existence of an ancient demon living in this bowels that has been there since the revolutionary times. And I love that for it.
I definitely think they work together as a piece, and it's nice to have one that I think, obviously, just from the title and King's own leanings and Phil Hester's own artistic leanings, it'd be something that is you can read Year One after this, and I think it'd be pretty seamless. It's kind of funny because Steve was sharing like comic like sales lists that this sold terribly, but Batman Year One was the best.
The best selling
book. So like that's really funny.
That's
still
so
holds
fucking
up,
funny.
man. Still, people still should read it. So it's
That's still such a good fucking book, yeah.
But I like, because I do think there was a disconnect between as cool as it is, and as much as I like it, like with like Legends of the Dark Knight, where like, we have a lot of Year One era Batman stuff. It normally always veers, once you've done Year One, you go straight supernatural as like the contrast, and like we're setting up Batman can do multiple different genres and tones. I love that, but it is something where I'm like, okay, it would be nice to see like more continuations of what Miller was doing without any supernatural stuff, where it is just Batman as the outlier. And we like, even like Shaman, fantastic story, we pivot away from that. Long Halloween, we pivot away from that. Even just when it's just supervillain stuff, we put on different costumes and we start doing things. And I'm not disparaging that, but like there's a quantity. It makes like that version of Batman like a very small percentage. So I like having and when you go history and Gotham stuff, it always goes supernatural. Like every single history of Gotham stuff has a supernatural element to it. And I think it's all really cool. Like Ian said, it's cool that those exist. I'm in favor of Batman being able to fight a giant dragon in the middle of the city. Like I think that's it. You should be able to do that. It's what makes DC cool. But I also do think there's a lot of meat on the bone And normally the movies are the only things that explore this, but I think the comics can even do it better, to just delve into the world Miller kind of built with Year One, and what kind of corruption and purely systemic issues we can deal with then, and using Batman as that one fantastical element within the fiction to fight that, because there isn't a Batman in our world, so we can't fight it like he can. And even this, by removing Batman entirely and having Slam Bradley, you have basically a crime story that has no superheroic elements whatsoever. It's entirely within the realms of a noir. Again, very Sin City vibes, very Miller inspired in that regard as well. So I think all of that's really cool and interesting. I'm glad this book exists. But the book itself, as much as I do like, I don't think it's going to be one that I'm going to go back to a lot.
I mean, it's also not exactly something that is very triumphant or like, you know, empowering to read. It's a bit of a downer, as it were. And I think that's interesting, and I like stories like that. You know, it's hard to find those kind of stories outside of Batman-centric comics. So those are always very valid and you know, enjoyable in their own right. But yeah, it is like harder to go back to that, because even, you know, Year One has, like, you know, he saves the baby, and there's like, you know, as bleak as that book becomes, there is still like that hope at the end. This one's like, I like how the end of this book is just like, so why'd you tell me all this? Someone should know. Just, there's no like real catharsis to this story. It's just, and this is fucked up, and this is why things are fucked up, and it's all my fault. The end.
Well, and not even just that, right? But the thing in the last couple panels, literally the last couple panels, where he's like, so all of this shit is fucked up, and your grandma was crazy. And by the way, you probably are too. So enjoy living with that. I'm gonna peace out now. That's so fucked up. It's the final issue is one of the biggest gut punches King's Batman I think has ever really had, which is saying something, because he's got a lot of gut punches. Like, the man got left at the altar. But in this book in particular, like, when you break down everything that happened with his grandma, the fact that she kills her husband point blank with a gun in the face at Wayne Manor, pretends that he killed himself, goes on the news, creates this whole image for herself, murders him, and basically signs it as sincerely the Batman. And then going from that to Batman learning this history of, like, this is how your grandparents actually died. This is actually what happened to your aunt that you never met. All of this is crazy and fucked up, and all of it got chalked up to this idea of Batman. And so, as crazy as they were, you are too. And what you're doing right now is just another expression of exactly what your parents did. Your parents were Batman, and it destroyed them and it killed them. Your grandparents were Batman, and it destroyed them and it killed them. And now you're Batman, and it's going to destroy you and kill you. So enjoy that.
Yeah.
So fucked up.
It's a bleak one.
It's so fucked up.
Top 10 most depressing comic endings of all time.
Literally.
Coming in at number 1.
Literally. I love that ending. It's so good. It's like, I enjoy this book. I still wouldn't put it like as like top 5 Tom King books. But there's something like so perfect about the way it ends, where I'm like, oh, that's the man. That's why I love this guy. Because of shit like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Alfie, what do you think of the ending?
I think the ending's really strong. I think everything with Constance, is that how you pronounce it? Constance Wayne?
Constance, yeah.
Yeah, I think her character is probably the most interesting one in the book. I think there's a real interesting dynamic with having a woman that is a victim of, like, spousal abuse, but from that time period where they kind of just like, that's just a fact of life, get over yourself and like deal with it, and like it doesn't impact them, it doesn't belittle them, it doesn't demean them, and if anything, it's like meaningless to them because they've got so much fucking power. But at the same time, it's like you also don't want to get fucking hit. Like that's always going to be a betrayal of trust and like have some kind of trauma response. And like she's put on this mask that's like giving her the strength to do these things, but she's still a vulnerable person. But I don't know. I think King wrote her very well. Wrote her very differently from how he's written a lot of women in the past. I think she's a very unique character, and I can see her exactly as like what I imagine Batman's grandmother being like. Because like I can see this lady. It feels very much like this is who raised Thomas Wayne, who therefore then raised Bruce. I see that pipeline very clearly. I think it's very impressive as a writer being able to do that. Where you can not only write a character as difficult to nail the voice down as Batman really, really well, you can then extend that outwards to chart a process of like behavior and developmental like influences from parental figures and onwards, and I think that's really, really cool. So her whole thing when she unravels the scheme and then lays out like what her plan is going to be doing with using Helena's death as like a way to reignite Gotham back into its senses and like resolve things for the meantime and keep the fortune and make things work. Like I think that was really, really clever and really interesting. And it makes me more so like I'd rather learn more about that than Slam Bradley a lot of the time. I think that was a more engaging plot thread, but obviously you can't lead with that because that's the whole mystery, right? But like I wouldn't mind if other people later on do more stuff with that character when we do like past Gotham stories, because I think she's interesting. I think out of every like Wayne family relation we've ever had, I think she's the one that actually is like, I'd be interested to see what a conversation between her and Bruce would look like. That would be interesting. Like, and other people, like, I don't really care. Like, even like Thomas, it's like, who cares? It's just his usual thing. Like, until he was like Flashpoint, like evil Batman and King's Run specifically, was it somewhat interesting? They had to have so many fucking caveats to make that conversation like neat. So I think that's definitely a strength to this, because like you two have said, I think it's a very big uphill battle to make any Wayne history stuff like work and any individual Wayne history characters work. But she was kind of the highlight of the book for me, and like everything wrapped up with the ending. It's bleak, but I guess I didn't have a stronger reaction to it as you two did, because it's Gotham. Like I know that's gonna end up like that, and like just Batman existing at the end doesn't make me think of it as bleak. I still think Batman knowing that and doing all of this thing can find a positive spin on it. So I didn't particularly think it was like this soul crushing like ending or anything. I think it was more so these are the results of this. This is the truth behind it. It wasn't just happenstance. It was like the failings of individual people making individual choices, and it's a cycle of behavior that you may be doomed to repeat. But I like knowing that. I guess that makes me feel more in control of things. Like makes me feel more like if I was like in Bruce's situation, hearing this information, it would fill in more blanks and let me like make better decisions in the future than like it being like what Bruce should have responded to after is like, oh, thank God, I've been dealing with this like bad butt shit like for this last fucking 2 years. This is actually a big relief to know it's just like some normal people shit. Like I actually trained for this. You know, I actually studied this, and like I was really starting to doubt like all my training, because I've been dealing with like dark multiverse shit. Like it's really hard, man. Like I'm prepared to take out like bank robbers and like muggers and shit, but this is actually more kind of my speed. So you know, thanks Slam, and then like just slap, and he's like, what the fuck? Like that's kind of that's a funny in my mind. So I don't know, I didn't quite have, I think the ending was really strong for itself, but it didn't leave me with like a gut punch in the same way. I was more so just kind of like that feeling at the end of Noir when like the jazz music plays and things are left unresolved. There's like the cigarette ash like lingers in the air, and we walk on to the next case. Like, it just felt more like that vibe to me. It's neither good nor bad, just it is what it is.
I think part of the reason it hit me so hard at the end there is I feel like we'd sort of turned a corner with King's version of Batman. And then in the context of where the Bat books are now, this is sort of compounding a lot of stuff that we've already been seeing in other people's writing. So like the whole premise of King's Batman was the idea of a 100-issue run to see, can Bruce Wayne be happy and be Batman? And so the run opens with that conflict of, no, he's unhappy and he's Batman. And then you get to that middle point where Catwoman leaves him at the altar, and the logic is that he deserves to be happy, but we need Batman more than he needs happiness, so I'm going to leave him because that's more important. And then you get the end in issue 85 where he has a really big speech where he says, no, it's not one or the other. I chose to be Batman, and all of this follows because I made that choice. I am happy. This is my life, and I'm in control of it. But you have this series of books that kind of push Batman towards a kind of self-actualization that you know is never going to last because it's comics. But then all of King's Batman stuff since then has been on a very different tone. Like you look at Killing Time, and the idea behind Killing Time is, let's not do a deep, dark character study of who Bruce Wayne is. Dude's just fucking crazy and he's awesome. Let's make him fight fucking tigers and stuff. And it's a completely different spin on that story. The last annual he did was Batman Annual 4, where it's that story every day, where it's Alfred just talking about what life is like for Batman every day. And it's like helping old ladies walk across the street and fighting dragons and time travel. Like it's a very affirming message. But then you get to where the character is now in what Chip Zdarsky's been doing and with what Ram V's doing, and we've gotten to the point where the idea is most of the stuff in this man's life is falling apart. He doesn't have his money anymore. He doesn't have his family house anymore. His wife left him. He's living in this brownstone, and he's essentially having a midlife crisis. And Ram V's whole run is just like, this promise you made to be Batman is going to come to an end eventually. And in the latest issue in 1070, he's on his parents' gravestones, and he's like, what's going to happen when I'm not here to clean the weeds off your tombs? What's going to happen when I don't get a chance to leave the flowers on your graves every day? And he's really contemplating like, oh shit, I am going to die at some point, and I don't know how to cope with how the world is going to handle me being here anymore. And then you get this book coming out at the exact same time, and instead of King doing like the fun self-affirming Batman, he's kind of gone back to fit with where his run started and where Batman is right now, which is, yeah, being Batman's a curse. You chose to make a deal with the devil, and the devil is about to reap your soul back because this was a bad idea and this was a childish mistake. And you're not a hero per se. You can be. But more than that, you're just fucking crazy. And so you read this, and in the same like day, you read every other issue of Batman coming out, and you're just like, wow, Batman's a really sad guy. And it just really hits, you know? Like this came out like the week of, if not a couple weeks before Batman or Detective 1070, where he's got that monologue at his parents' grave about what's going to happen when he dies. So like that back to back, it's a gut punch. It's definitely one of those things where it's like, there is no happy ending regardless of where you leave this dude.
Or the Batman.
Correct.
Okay.
Batman hyphen.
The Batman.
Batman.
I wonder if that
Batman.
was because of Slam Bradley. I wonder if that was specifically a like Detective Comics ref when he did have the hyphen originally.
Well, it is. Yeah, it's probably like a 27, or like he's introduced as Bat-Man.
Mm-hmm. I know they did that for Thomas a lot in the past as well, like a Silver Age.
I have no idea.
I
I think there's a good place to end it though, unless we have more stuff we want to talk about with this book.
I could talk about this book all day, but I'm not going to.
I'm good with that. We can leave it off here.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and go on to a rating then. I'll go first and give this 4 out of 5. Just should have used the N words.
I'm gonna give this 5 out of 5 baby corpses.
Oof.
I'll give this 4 out of 5 origins for Ace Chemicals that we keep doing.
Hey, why do we keep doing this? It's like everyone just needs to know.
Never has a company had more origins than Ace Chemical. I guess maybe Alchemax, but even then, I'm gonna bet Ace Chemical has had more origins for it
It's
than
it's
Alchemax.
every writer. It's every writer, because there's a thing in Morrison's run. There's a thing in Dini's run. There's a thing in King's run. There's a thing before the what's it called? There's a thing pre-crisis. There's stuff post-crisis. Like everyone, there's a thing in fucking Brubaker's run. Like everyone just needs to know where Ace Chemical came from. Where is this chemical company, and why did Batman name his dog after it? Someone explain.
People aren't ready for Chemical the Cat.
Chemical the Cat. It was a Jeff Johns thing too, wasn't it? Because in Earth 1, his mom is the owner of Ace Chemicals, right? I think.
No, his mom's an Arkham in Earth
Oh,
One.
right. His mom's an Arkham in Earth 1. Okay, no, never mind. Morrison, here, where Martha's parents owned Ace Chemicals. Okay.
Yeah.
Very
I don't
confusing.
know. So, oh wait, sorry, I'm gonna back us up. I did have one question here.
Yes.
So does this mean Thomas Wayne isn't actually a Wayne? Is he someone else's son?
As far as we can tell, yes, because Constance married, whatever his name was. Constance married into the Wayne family. She kills her husband, who is actually a Wayne, and then remarries and has a kid named Thomas. So she wasn't a Wayne by blood, and she didn't marry someone who was a Wayne by blood unless this dude had a brother or something, and then had Thomas, which means that Thomas is not actually a Wayne.
The implication I got from the ending was Slam Bradley was his grandfather when they slept together. In
They did sleep together.
Oh, because she does, yeah, and she does ask him to
I don't
like
think she
take care of
married.
Thomas and like. That's a good point. She does ask him to take care of Thomas and be like a good male role model.
And that's the
Interesting.
implication and why Batman's talking to him, like in his thing, what it means, like specifically, and like I think the implication there as well as Sam Bradley, like historically, would be the equivalent of Batman's father.
Yeah, because he came first.
He was the first detective in Detective Comics, and it's the same book, so like there's lineage there. So that was what I got from that.
That's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah, there's a lot of like
I like the
vagueness
vagueness of that.
by the end of this.
So that means that Slam Bradley, if he's Batman's grandfather, they both fucked Selena Kyle.
You're right.
And Slam Bradley's son, Slam Bradley Jr., also fucked Selena Kyle.
Slam Bradley, more like slam that dick down.
The slam comes in the name, right? Like, I guess, but like.
Okay, wait. One last thing. I love how in the lettering choice, how every time Slam Bradley hits someone, the sound effect is slam.
That's fun.
Yeah,
It's so funny.
Brilliant.
The thing I'll leave on, I don't know if you got this far when you read the Keenan Kong comics, but there's an issue where they go back, like I Ching and Liang like take Keenan to see early Detective Comics, where it's Slam Bradley beating up racial stereotypes, and like I really want Keenan to like look at Bruce kind of weird. I kind of see what you're. There's like a history there. It's like it's funny to see like two different takes on Slam Bradley with King making him like this racial allegory and like for passing and like presentation, and then when we go over to Gene Yang using Slam Bradley as like here's everything that's wrong with American Western comics and racism. Like I think that's two completely opposite standards. Someone who's actually from one of those races should like make an essay on that, because I think that'd be really interesting, because that's two complete, and they're both kind of modern. Like the new Superman stuff came out a couple of years ago now, but like they're both the biggest things that use Slam Bradley in recent memory.
Well, and the other interesting thing is like everyone at DC is very aware of like the old school racist history of Detective Comics, because back a couple of years ago now, DC solicited an omnibus that was Detective Comics before Batman, and it was supposed to collect all 26 issues of Detective before Batman. And then they pulled it and never released it, because if you read any of them, they are some of the most racist books ever published by this company. And there's no way in good conscience could have published 26 issues of Detective Comics pre-Batman without like drawing up a massive essay explaining, yeah, this is not okay. So the idea that like one person is like, let's just do that in its face. Let's take Slam Bradley, and let's talk about the Yellow Peril stuff in early Golden Age comics. And then the other side of it is, let's do that too, except instead of making Slam Bradley fight against it, let's make Slam Bradley a part of it because it is his lineage too. Those are really interesting, different interpretations of it, and that's a lot of fun. But I also sort of feel like this is all just pretense to eventually re-release or re-solicit that omnibus, because I really want to buy it and I really want to go through and look at those issues remastered and see what the uproar would be.
I mean, I just think it's funny that like they get all the way to soliciting it, and then they're like, "Oh no, we can't do this." And I wonder at what point they realized they couldn't do it. Was it in the process of going through and like HDifying the art? They were like, "Oh no, we knew like the one racist image on the cover, but we didn't know it was like this the whole way through."
Honestly,
like,
honestly, I'm pretty sure that is exact. I think exactly what happened. Let's collect all 26 issues of Detective before Batman. Here's a cover that's vaguely racist. Okay, neat. Solicit some guy.
oh shit, Steve, you're cutting out again.
Maybe like
Steve's being consumed by the AI that is threatened by his article. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna leave it on that note. Would it be my turn for something next time? Or
yeah.
Oh fuck! I don't have things prepared. Okay, actually, I have kind of been thinking on this one lately. I want to talk about the character archetype of the trickster villain. So your Rumpelstiltskins, your Batmite, Mixelspitlick, just that like trope of villain. I want to talk about the trickster villain archetype.
Okay, it sounds good.
All right, that'll be fun.
Yeah. So until next time, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of the oppressed.
And I am the oppressor. Start championing shit.
We will fight next time.
On Geeky Gentlemen, where we will be discussing things.